listening to the Eric Dawson Radio Show on 94.3 FM.
Hey, this is Eric Dawson, and you're listening to the Eric Dawson Radio Show on 94.3 FM Splash Radio. Right, bridging the gap. It's a great conversation that we just had with Kevin Jenkins, and I'm looking forward to him coming back on as often as he'd like to share wisdom with our listeners. And now I'm joined by former mayor Eldridge Hawkins, former mayor of the city, and you're gonna have to explain this to me. How do they say the city township?
The city of Orange Township.
The city of Orange Township. So you're gonna have to explain to me why it's called the city of Orange Township. But Mayor Hawkins is also a retired police officer from the township of West Orange.
Yes, sir.
And want to have a robust discussion about all that's going on, within these police departments across the nation. Why black folks feel the way they do, how we remedy it, and so forth, so on. So if you want to call in, 973-457-8000 is the call-in number. If you want to just listen, 213-493-0287. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man. So a lot going on, man. And, and a lot of unrest in the African-American community in particular, and then highlighted by, it was already, right? We had, whether it was Tamir, whether it was Trayvon, Trayvon was not a police officer, but then, we had, Michael Brown, we had, the list goes on. And then we had in 2 days, right? Was it 2 days? We had the two in Minnesota and in Baton Rouge. Mm-hmm. So a lot of unrest. What's going on, man?
Well, clearly there's an issue confronting our nation, our country, that's centered on police activity and their interactions with the community, and I think that it's really coming into focus now in large part because of the media. I don't think that what's happening at this time, whether folks were aware of it or not, it was happening before. I think it's just coming more into focus because the media is paying more attention to it, which means it's coming into our homes via the internet, via the TVs. I think that the advent of body cameras and such that are actually giving us, or even technology with cell phones, are giving us blow by blow in many respects of some of these incidents where folks are able to now see with their own eyes, for better or worse, what's going on out in the streets for all to see.
And so it was happening, right? And it was not a figment of the black man's imagination that he was being mistreated by police officers.
Well, look, let's be clear.
Because I think that's part of the issue, right? It's been happening, and you heard the outcries from the community. How man, I got stopped. He stopped me just because I was black. Didn't have to talk to me like that. Didn't have to behave like that with me. And now, because of the video cameras on the cell phones, we get to see this, and it doesn't seem to have curtailed in some cases some of the activities, because when we look at some of the officers, they have records of aggression. When we go look back at them, the one in Minnesota, they're looking back into his jacket, right, and they see that he's had complaints before, and those complaints went unaddressed until now. You have somebody dead.
Well, certainly there's a lot of issues, and I think let's be clear when we say these types of things have been happening. When I say that, I mean that there has been interactions between the police and the public, some good, some bad. Certainly some have ended up in deaths. Some have been justifiable shootings in terms of legality. Some have not been. So I think that has been an ongoing process. I think what is also important to note is that while there have been recent police shootings, there's been a public outcry, I guess, in the negative when officers are not indicted and convicted for these shootings. And I think that one thing that we have to recognize also is that we form our opinions based on the information we get, legitimately, right? If we watch 15 minutes of TV, that's the information that we're going to base our judgments on naturally on whether we feel an officer did something right or did something wrong. And certainly we have our peers that end up in jury boxes around the country that hear testimony day in, day out relative to a specific case, right? But sometimes we feel that we somehow in our 15 minutes of hand-picked TV input that is being fed to us by the media, that we're in a better position to judge whether or not a particular officer did something wrong, more so than the jury box or our peers that were sitting in the jury room. So I think we have to be cautious when we're quick to throw police under the bus when they've gone through the system, and citizens like us have sat in that jury box and said, no, he did not do something illegal. Now, with that, I want to shift the discussion slightly because there is a perception out there, most certainly, that law enforcement is harder on members of the black community, and that's not necessarily just white officers, but black officers as well. So there is a perception issue that we have to deal with. And just because a shooting is legal,
was it perception or reality?
Well, I think it's both, right? But so where I'm going with it is, just because a shooting is legal, right, it doesn't necessarily mean it had to come to pass, or that the application of force across racial lines is pushed out equally, right? There's a disparate application of the use of force in many cases across racial boundaries, right? So, I mean, I've been in a situation myself where I had where I could have fired my weapon. An individual was looking to throw a baby over the balcony. I could have fired a shot. It would have been a good shoot. No one would have debated it, right? But we opted to have a conversation and talk that individual off the ledge, right? So I don't think the question really is, are the shoots lawful or not, right? But the situations as they come to pass, how often are officers, when they're confronted with people of color, do they opt to exercise the softer method, whether with respect to talking them down, de-escalation, versus going straight to as the case may be, higher levels of force. Now, every case has to be evaluated on a case-by-case scenario. I'm not painting with any broad brush, but I think that we have to understand that there is, at least on some level, in people of all races, some subconscious bias at times, right, that may allow us to perceive people of color as a threat more so than people in the white community, and that would be evidenced by scenarios where you see young people, 12 years old, that may have a toy gun getting shot, or black males with no gun getting shot, but then you may see a video of a white male in a park waving the gun around, and the officers are talking to him for 30 minutes, trying to really talk him down, going out of their way, right? So now, whether that's a prevalent thing happening all the time or not, that's what the media is pushing, right, which creates a certain reality in the minds of the viewers, which means it's certainly something that we have to deal with.
Well, but I don't know if the media is pushing it to be something that's in the minds of the viewer, because I think that some folks can give their own account of when they were mistreated by police officers. So, I mean, I was on the phone with a friend of mine on my way to the show, and I gave two accounts of when I was mistreated by police officers. One was when I moved up to Bergen County, New Jersey, and I had this, real fancy 71 Super Beetle convertible, and I had just started growing my dreadlocks, so they were probably, about 4 inches long, and I felt that I had every right to be in Ramsey, New Jersey, and so as I'm driving my car, I get stopped one time, and I had a suit on. I was an art director at the largest publisher in the world, Prentice Hall. Police officer pulled me over, and I asked why he stopped me. He asked for my license, registration, insurance card, and I gave it to him. He checked it all out, and then he let me go. 2 days later, I got stopped again. 3 days after that, I got stopped again. One time they stopped me and had me sit on the curb in the service road in a suit while my staff drove by me. And then finally it escalated to the point where an officer, I'm driving across the bridge from Ramsey to Saddlebrook, so I'm crossing over Route 17. The officer made a U-turn, followed me into the parking lot. This is about 6:30 in the morning. And I'm getting out of the car. I see him, and I'm chuckling at this point because this is just happening so frequently. And I'm not one ticket. right? I'm getting out and I'm opening my door and I've got Dunkin' Donuts coffee in my hand. Officer pulls up and he says, "Stay in your car." And my door was open, so he gets out of his car and he slams my vintage Beatles door closed. And so I just said to him, "Officer, please don't slam my car door," and then he started mouthing off and we're going back and forth. And I gave him my information. I asked him, I said, "Look, this is, at that point, it might have been 8 or 9 times that I had been stopped."
Right. Well, can I jump in there?
Sure, you can.
Because you're not alone in that, right? You're not the only person that.
So all I'm trying to say is that, so when I see it happen on television, it is not that media is pushing it that drives my opinion. It is my personal experience that drives my opinion. And I say, you know what? That happened to me, so I'm seeing it happen to somebody else. So
well, certainly that's real, right? So our information system forms our opinion,
correct?
Right? So part of our information system is what we see in our daily lives
and what we experience,
and what we experience, and others of it is what's pushed on the media. Let's not understate the power of the media.
Correct.
Right? When you have nation, if you look at the world, right? When people are performing coup d'états and all this other stuff, what do? They want to go after the media so they can control the messaging.
Absolutely.
Right. So it is a very powerful force. But let's separate these two issues, if you will, between being pulled over by the police, right, and surviving police incidents and the escalation of violence. Right. Look, one credential you left out when you listed mayor and police officer was that I'm a black African American male.
There we go.
Okay,
that's right.
So I was that before I was an officer. I'm that now. I've been that when I was mayor, and I'll be that to the day I die. So everything that you're speaking of, I can understand and relate to. Right? I've had negative interactions where I've been pulled over by multiple police officers. Right? Even escorted out of town by the police and told not to come back. Right? When there was no ticket issued and nothing negative happened. Right? But what didn't happen, despite that unpleasant interaction, what didn't happen? I didn't get shot. Right? There was no physical confrontation. Right? Now, it could have been that the officers just didn't go there, but it also could have been that I conducted myself in such a way as to not escalate the situation. Right? Now, I didn't appreciate what they did. Right? And we did certain things after the fact to try to resolve that and make sure it didn't happen again. But I think one thing that is missing when we are dealing with law enforcement interactions, regardless of the color of the officer, is that people, and sometimes maybe justifiably so, just as you indicated, may be feeling like they're harassed or maybe getting stopped where they feel they don't have a right to, and that may very well be the case. But the correct thing is not to go toe-to-toe and hold court on the street with that officer, because you will lose, right? And time again, and I'm not even going to address the use of force component right now. What I'm talking about is survival, right? Time and time again, I've seen police interactions on video, right, where the officer gives a command, right, that is not followed or is argued by the individual they're sitting out there with, right, and it devolves very rapidly into a physical altercation that ends up in serious injury or death, right? So one of the things that we can do to stop this in the short term, and I'm not saying that this is the catch-all or that folks feel that they have to endure improper police conduct, right, but I am saying that our priority should be, for the officer and the citizen, should be to get home at the end of the day.
That's correct.
Survive that encounter, right? So how do we start teaching people in these vehicles how to appropriately conduct themselves when they get pulled over by the police, what to do with their hands, where to have their credentials, what to say, what not to say, how to comply with those directives in such a way that that they don't escalate the situation, right? But then, okay, if we put our other hat back on now, there are folks out there, and we've seen this also in some cases, where there's individuals in a minority community that feel like they've done everything they can to comply, but they still get shot, right? I saw a video, I think it was down in South Carolina, where an officer, was pulled over an individual in a gas station. He was already out of the car, right? The officer asked him for his driver's license. He reached into the car to go get it, and he got shot. Right. If I'm not mistaken, that officer ended up going to jail or going to prison, right? So clearly, there are times that officers can have bad shoots or illegal shoots, but there are certainly the large majority of them that are lawful. Right, but even when that's the case, I think we have to step back and look at the cross-section of lawful shoots, right? I'm using that term now instead of good shoots, right? Lawful shoots, and start thinking about, okay, well, how often are these lawful shoots, or percentage-wise, how many times are we seeing this disparate use of force, even though it may be lawful, against members of the minority community versus members of the white community? How can we reconcile that difference and start to make some positive change where we reduce the likelihood for that to occur?
So, I mean, one of the things that I posted on my Facebook page yesterday is I said, encourage blacks to know their rights I said, or encouraging blacks to know their rights during an encounter with the police is a good thing, but encouraging blacks to exercise common sense, especially when the officer refuses to, is essential. So I agree with that. That you have the power to de-escalate a situation. But one of the things that I think that separates maybe you from some of the folks who have these really, really bad encounters, not all of them, but some of them, is we experience different pressures in our lives, right? That allow us to not necessarily be able to navigate the way that we might want to, right? So you want to take back something you said or something you did. And when in these poor communities in particular, where there's a socioeconomic divide between the rest of, the world, middle class, upper middle class, rich, and then you have these poor folk, there's a lot of pressure. And then the last thing, and look, I'm not taking away accountability. I think that folks have to be accountable. And I'm saying but, because there's a but there. And the but is that, man, sometimes I can't, sometimes I hate being on FM, man, because the words I want to use, I can't. The crap that folks already are taking in their lives. And then you have this officer that comes and gives them more crap. Just gives them more crap. And, and for nothing. I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was a video. I don't know if I sent you the link to it, but they were filming the Newark Police Department, and it was on PBS. And you had this young man who was just walking down the street in Newark, and these 4 or 5 police officers came out of nowhere. And they said, "We want to talk to you." Now, just imagine. I mean, even me, right? If I'm walking down the street and 4 or 5 people come out of nowhere and say, "I want to talk to you," I'm not going to have a reaction that just kind of invites them in to talk to me. Not at night, not in Newark. No, I'm going to recoil a little bit. And so he moved away trying to understand the situation. They grabbed him and threw him to the ground. And during that entire scene, they were justifying why they did it as opposed to apologizing for what they did. And I think that in a community or in communities where folks are impacted by that on a regular basis, where there is no apology, where there is justification, where they were saying to him, you pulled away from me. He said, "No, I didn't." "Yeah, you did. And so I want you to acknowledge you pulled away from me. I want you to acknowledge that you were wrong, and then we can go from there. But unless you do that, then we can't really have a discussion." We're looking at it. And then he showed it to like a top brass person in the police department, and he acknowledged that what those officers did was wrong. And I think sometimes people just want to be validated as human beings.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. But let me just address that this way. If we are on the street, if I get a call, if I'm an officer again, or I get a complaint, or we can even reduce complaints by common courtesy, right? So let's say a call goes out over the air that there's a blue Toyota 4Runner that was just involved in a crime. You see one, it was a significant crime. The officers pull up, they gun the person out of the car, they put him on the ground, they cuff him, and then they find out that was not the right vehicle, right? An apology in that instance or an explanation might be appropriate and could go a long way to respect. "I'm sorry, sir. Listen, this is what happened. We got a call. There was an armed robbery with your vehicle, with your color. Apologize for that, but this is what happened. This is why we took the action that we do." And you might find that a lot of people in that scenario, while they don't appreciate being pulled out the car, they do appreciate the explanation, and they understand the posture that you took given the gravity of the situation. And perhaps if we had more communication, there would be less pushback in that space. But that being said, I don't think the officers need to apologize for doing their job. Right, this is a very difficult job. The citizenry has to comply with the officer's directives. That does not mean that if an officer is doing something inappropriate or unlawful, that's okay. Right, but there is a time and place to voice that and fight that. Right, that is after the fact. That's through internal affairs complaints. That's through litigation. That's through your mayor's office, your council's office. Right, in those arenas, those are the proper forms to address improper.
And I agree with you, but when black folk can see that police officers can extend that courtesy to a non-black person when they stop them. So they know they're capable of doing it. They just choose not to do it when it's a black person. I'm saying that
I don't disagree that it should be applied fairly across color lines, right? I think everybody is human. Everybody has a certain level of respect that they want to receive, and that they should give others and the officer on the scene. So I don't disagree that everybody should be treated equally. I think that that's appropriate. But again, we have to kind of look at the totality of each individual circumstance and act accordingly. If officers aren't doing the right thing, when I was mayor, we addressed that. But we did not, to my recollection, have any significant complaints along these lines. I think we had a good police department. We dropped crime over 25%, and part of that was community policing, right? When we start talking about solutions, getting officers on the ground. We used to talk about them walking the beat, and walking up and down the street. One of the reasons that was key was because they started to build relationships with people in the community, where they became more than just a person on the corner. That became a gentleman or a young person that you spoke to. So perhaps because that relationship is there, instead of escalating force, you can say, hey, listen, Johnny, I've watched you grow up. I know your parents. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about this, right? Maybe you can start to resolve things more. And that's one of the ways we were able to successfully drop crime and not have confrontations, because we put the officers back on the street, right, in the street, in the community, where they started to, again, know the folks that they were policing and have those relationships. And it's also important to have a police force that's reflective of the community that you serve. I believe that wholeheartedly, right? Whether the community is 50% white, black, mixed with Latino, whatever it is, you should have a blended police force so that you have a more effective communication, a higher trust level, and it's easier to build bridges and relationships to prevent some of these things before they occur. And I think it's also important to note that while some might think, based on media coverage, that there is a large stream of law enforcement incidents that are going unpunished, and that cops are just getting away with stuff, I think it goes without saying that most cops are doing the right thing. Right, but beyond that, you can. I think there was a matter of fact, there was a Washington Post article and some others that were very clear in that over the past decade, authorities have indicted an average of 5 officers a year for fatal shootings. And in 2015, 18 officers were charged, compared to 47 between 2005 and 2014. So when you look at the numbers, at least in 2015, indictments of police officers had tripled. Right, so officers that are doing the wrong thing are being held accountable. People are watching, and that may be contributed to the cameras and the body mics, and that's a good thing when an officer are held accountable. Okay, so it's important that folks understand that police aren't getting a free ride, and that they are going through the process, and that if they are cleared on a shooting, that the process that they were supposed to go through, I guess you could argue, worked. Right, because citizens like us, it could be you, sit on that jury panel, and you hear the facts, and you make a decision.
Portland style come back again. Yes, people, it's all about Father Burbick, Chef Sarge, and Father Bertie presents the annual Portland Seafood Affair. That's right, massive, it's all about the Portland Seafood Affair. Saturday, July the 23rd, 2016. Place to be, 272 Park Avenue, Orange, New Jersey. And remember, cookout time starts 12 o'clock noon until everything on the menu. Seafood, jerk chicken, oxtail, fried fish. And you can't forget about the busso soup. Man, it's all about the annual Portland Seafood Affair. And you don't know, it's all about music by Larry Rankin from Silverado, DJ Printer, Judah Rooms, Bak. And you know it's all about 2 sound systems string up in the lawn, Jawan sound system, and Ray Harmony Music. Making the date and don't be late, party people. It's all about Father Burbick, Jeff Sarge, and Bertie. Portland Seafood Affair, Saturday, July the 23rd. Be there.
1, 2, 3, hit that!
News and information.
Only Eric can give it to you like this.
It's the Eric Dawson Radio Show on Splash Radio.
Hey, this is Eric Dawson. You're listening to Splash Radio 94.3 FM. This is, in fact, the Eric Dawson Talk Radio Show. On-air number is 973-457-8000. We've got, I got to let you all know, all of my folks, my listeners who tune in after I'm gone to listen to What's Your Take with Lady B and Layla. I'm sorry to disappoint you. They won't be here today, but they will be here next week, but you can jam to the sounds of Country Mind. That's what you can do, right? So we're going to bring a little flavor to you at 7 o'clock, so make sure you tune in. You might need to decompress from the conversation that we're having now. And so Country Man will bring you some great tunes, so make sure you listen to them right after. And then you can check out What Your Take with Lady B and Layla next week, same time, 7 o'clock. So I'm here with former Mayor Eldridge Hawkins, former mayor of the
City of Orange.
We're going to get to why that is in a minute. We're going to drag this on. But before we end the show, he's going to explain why it's the City of Orange Township, and also retired police officer from the Township of West Orange. We were talking earlier, during the break, actually, about bringing this whole thing up with Black Lives Matter. They released a 10-point manifesto. And Black Lives Matter seems to be the group right now that has kind of taken up the mantle in terms of bringing attention to the mistreatment, right, or the inequities that exist between law enforcement and in the black community. And so I just kind of want to get your opinion on this 10-point manifesto.
Sure. And before you go through each one, I just want to say that I'm actually pleased to see that the organization is becoming focused. Right? Marching is great, protesting is great for whatever the issue that you may be dealing with. But I think in order to have forward-moving progress, you have to bring that to a focal point, bring that to a head. What are the main issues? What are the resolutions? What are we looking to accomplish? What is our mission, right? And in a larger sense, you might argue that it's to create actual or the appearance of more fair treatment with minorities. But what does that mean? How does that take shape? Right. So I think that it's great that they're actually trying to come forward with something.
I agree. But like I always say, I think at the end, if you're not registering people to vote, and if people are not voting for folks who can change policies that impact our community, marching to me just isn't enough. And like I said, OB, I'm going to invest in some of these shoe manufacturers, man, because all that marching, people need new shoes. Mm-hmm. But the first thing they talked about was ending the broken window policing policy, which aggressively polices minor crimes, right? And what they say is that it unfairly targets minorities.
Okay, so let's understand what the broken windows theory is. In 2 seconds, the best way I can explain it is if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. Right, so there's an idea in policing, in economic development, in urban decay, in zoning, and code enforcement that if you have a broken window on a block that goes unrepaired, and you don't hold that homeowner accountable for fixing it, then another window gets broken, and then another, and then another, and the grass starts to grow 5 feet high, right? And then the house becomes in disrepair. Now the neighbor next to them cannot sell their house because the house next to it is so much in deplorable condition that the property values start to go. Then that house becomes boarded up. Nobody wants to buy a house next to a boarded up house, so you start to see it spread further and further down the street, right? That urban decay. So the idea is that if we can handle or address the little things, we simultaneously keep the bigger things from going out of control. And I think that by and large, that has been a successful police strategy. Now, it may in fact have a disproportionate effect on minorities, but you have to weigh that out or meet that out against the successes and the positives that it has in terms of preserving communities, having improved quality of life within the community, and all the positive strides. So I would say that that's a successful policy that would need to remain, but that does not mean that the various municipalities cannot take a second look at how officers may be interacting with minorities or targeting them. But again, it becomes a balancing act. Everything is about balance. And I don't think that anybody's going to argue that the smaller criminal activities that may not land you in jail for 20 years, like smoking weed on your porch or littering, should be let go, because I don't think anybody really wants to live in an environment that is filthy, that is dangerous, and is not someplace that they could be proud of. And those are the quality of life issues that the broken windows theory helps us address.
And so, in theory, I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And I was all for, giving tickets for folks littering, jaywalking. I talk a lot about how all of those things are issues that are not issues in communities that everybody say they want to live in, right? In those communities, folks are not stepping over, garbage on the streets. They're not, dealing with all of those things. However, when you look at the social economic divide and you look in these inner cities, the question is, and it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg, I guess, in some respects. You want to be able to address those things, but some would argue that they're bigger fish to fry in the community.
Well, certainly there's bigger fish to fry, right? But my administration, the city of Orange, and our history is proof positive that those issues are not mutually exclusive, right? At the same time we were dealing with code enforcement and quality of life issues through our task force, right? We had massive drug operations going on where we had huge seizures of marijuana, higher level drugs, and guns. And we used all of these law enforcement techniques simultaneously. Yes, we went into the street and pulled guns, but we also had gun buyback programs where people could voluntarily surrender their weapons and get paid without any questions anonymously. So we did a variety of things at the same time to create a holistic approach to make a difference in the community. So what do you got for number 2?
Number 2 says use community oversight for misconduct rather than having the police department decide what consequences officers should face. So that's whether you should have these community review boards, right, or whether you should trust the police to police themselves.
Well, I think that is something that should be evaluated from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I think it can certainly have positives and negatives.
What would be the negatives?
Well, the negatives would be that there are certain nuances to law enforcement, be it the actual laws, legal standards, or even understanding specifically what training and experience a particular officer has, and by extension, what level of decision making he should have had. Because at least in New Jersey, that is a standard that they're governed by. When you find yourself in court, what would an officer of equal training and experience do if he was similarly situated?
So couldn't we just find or develop the criteria by which we select the citizens to be on the citizen review board to ensure that they had those qualifications, so that when they were evaluating these things, we were assured that that they were experienced enough to be able to do that?
I think that's a possibility. You might also consider having a blended board of civilians with actual law enforcement. But let's remember,
But do you think that they should have that at the end of the day? Because in Newark, I know they have a review board, but they don't have, is it subpoena power? Which is what they're lacking.
Well, let's address it this way, right? Typically, you have a chain of command. There's internal affairs that generally reports directly to the chief, and in some capacity, there may be a higher power prosecutor's office, a district attorney's office that weighs in on these issues. Some towns opt to have a civilian police director in lieu of or in addition to the chief. So in that capacity, you get a civilian, someone that's a non-uniform personnel that does have some discretion over the disciplinary actions of those in the department. And let's also remember that in many towns, not all, it depends on your form of government, the mayor is also the final arbiter or the technical appointing authority in many cases. So the mayor is accountable to the people, right? Mm-hmm. They put him in or out of office every 4 years. So if you don't feel that the municipality is being managed appropriately, the buck would stop with the mayor.
Okay. And so the next thing is the third listed thing in their manifesto: make standards for reporting police use of deadly force.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to speak for every state. I would expect that by and large this is true throughout the country. It most certainly is true in New Jersey. And this kind of dovetails into the previous point. We can theorize about different review boards and such, but we are also constrained by Attorney General guidelines, state statutes, and otherwise. And in New Jersey, there are several rules or regulations that outline the use of force pursuant to the Attorney General guidelines. And there are use of force reports, right, that every officer should be filling out once they reach a certain threshold in the use of force continuum, if you will. So if an officer starts rolling around the ground with an individual, that should be documented. There should be a use of force report indicating that there was kicking, punching, pepper spray, batons, a weapon fired. So I think that this organization is spot on in asking that there be standards for reporting the use of deadly force, and I would submit that is happening in most, if not all, states, just off of general knowledge, but most certainly here in New Jersey. So I think they're 100% correct, and I think that should continue being documented. Okay.
And then the fourth thing is independently investigate and prosecute police misconduct. So again, what they're saying, just like the previous listed thing, they don't want the police, so they don't trust the police investigating the police.
Now, I think I can understand the notion of not wanting one entity to investigate itself, and I think there most certainly has been a move or different jurisdictions that have a higher power do that. So even in New Jersey, for example, if an officer gets in a shooting, the municipality is not going to convene a grand jury in their municipal court. Okay, the prosecutor's office would get involved with that shooting scene almost immediately. If there's a shooting, the prosecutor's office is going to come out, and there's going to be an investigation and a determination somewhere down the line on whether or not they want to move for indictment or not, or if there's going to be an indictment, then the people would be able to sit in that jury box and hear those facts and make a determination. So I think that there is also already some form of independent or quasi-independent investigations that take place. I don't think that is an inappropriate ask. When you come to shooting scenarios, I do think it would be inappropriate administratively to refer every day-to-day complaint to an outside authority. I think at some point you have to take care of your own house. And I don't think that every layer of government has the resources to deal with every police department underneath its command or jurisdiction. But I think to the extent reasonable, if you have something that rises to the level of a shooting or a homicide, potential homicide, then having an outside agency look at it is not a horrible thing, if for any other reason that it gives the appearance of objectivity and may increase trust, and all of those things I think are important.
Yeah, so I don't think that they, and I had to reread the paragraph underneath that, number 4, but they list as an example if a police officer should shoot someone. So I don't think they're talking about misconduct, meaning I cursed at you or you cursed at me or he did some.
Like I said, I can guarantee in New Jersey, if an officer shoots someone, that local police department is not going to be the end all be all. There's going to be some type of dialogue with the county prosecutor's office.
Okay, and then number 5, this one sounds good, but I don't know how realistic it can be. It says have the racial makeup of police departments reflect the communities they serve.
Well, as I indicated before we even looked at this list, I thought that was an excellent idea.
How do you do that?
Well, there's a variety of things you can try to do, but you're also constrained by the rules and the laws, right? If you live in a multicultural community where you have a high level of Spanish-speaking individuals or Creole or French-speaking individuals that may be Haitian or otherwise, right, it would only behoove you to try to recruit officers that speak that language so that you can better communicate on scene, right? So I think that is spot on, but we are also constrained many times by our applicant pool, right? Who is actually applying for these positions, who is taking the test. Many municipalities in New Jersey are civil service towns, which means you're virtually hired based on your score on a statewide test, and that list may be augmented or superseded in some cases by individuals that have veterans preference. There may be specialty lists sometimes for those with special skills or languages, but by and large, you would go down that list and you hire simply the next person with the highest score that's qualified to do the job.
We have a caller. Caller, state your name.
Greg Boyle.
Hi, Greg. Welcome to the show. Do you have a question or a statement?
Eric, I do. I've been listening to Mayor Hawkins, and I really appreciate the segment. I think a lot of clarity has been shared, and that's really a good thing. Especially as we dialogue.
Thank you.
About these big problems. I just wanted to ask if Mayor Hawkins would explain, the definition, legally, what is use of deadly force. Okay. And the reason why I asked the question is because I know there's been a lot of talk, debate, dialogue about the supposed police officer that is exercising deadly force took an option and shot somebody, in an arm or a leg. Would you explain that, sir?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. So, first, deadly force is lethal force, any force that could, in essence, take a life. Shooting someone in New Jersey requires that an individual or the officer be in fear of his life or someone else's, to the extent that someone would suffer serious bodily injury or death. There is one standard, right? There is no such thing in New Jersey as a warning shot or shooting somebody in the kneecap or the arm. It is presumed in New Jersey that if you pull that trigger, right, your life or someone else has to be in serious danger of bodily harm, injury, or death, right? That's the standard. So it wouldn't seem logical to try and shoot somebody in the knee if, in fact, they're truly trying to kill you, right? You're shooting to stop that threat. And I'm not even sure that we would want to open Pandora's box to a lower threshold to when an officer might be able to shoot, because then we would have more problems. So in New Jersey, as I said, there's one standard. Right, you shoot to stop the threat. So legally speaking, if a shooting is justified, so I'm going to say this again, legally speaking, if a shooting is justified, it matters not whether you shot him in the head, the chest, the knee, or the pinky toe, for that matter. There's no legal distinction, because if you had the right to take that life, where that bullet goes is of no consequence relative to that individual that's aggressing against you or someone you're supposed to protect.
Oh, okay. So the next thing, thanks for the clarification, thanks for the call.
Yes.
The next thing is require officers to wear body cameras.
I support that idea. I mean, there may be officers out there that don't like cameras, but I think that it can many times save you, right? If there's a borderline issue that is questionable, where people may find it hard to believe, if you want them to understand what you were going through psychologically, emotionally in the heat of that moment, it could be certainly evidentiary and helpful to see that video. I've experienced something with a camera myself that it wasn't shooting related, but it certainly saved me, at least in I would say in terms of credibility with my supervisors. I was involved with a police pursuit that went down 280 one time. And it was hot and the radios were sticking where I couldn't communicate out to headquarters. Our policy says that when you lose communications with your department during a pursuit, you're supposed to break off that pursuit. So it just so happened that I was doing that at the same time the sergeant was ordering me to break off the pursuit. But by that time we were so far down the highway, I had no choice but to go to the next exit and turn around.
Okay.
After the pursuit had been terminated, I happened upon the same vehicle that I was chasing that was flipped over, crashed. The guys had run out. To everybody outside my vehicle, it sounded as if I disregarded the sergeant's orders.
Got it.
Continued pursuing, right, and the car flipped over. Now, push came to shove, I was the only one there to explain the story, so my story would have been what it was. But I doubt that supervisor would have ever trusted me again, because it just didn't feel right. So when he got to the scene, he pushed me to the side, didn't say anything to me. He went straight to the car, and he played back the camera. And what did he see? Exactly what I said. And he says, we're all right, right? So I think the camera it's the eye of truth.
Right.
So I subscribe to the idea that cameras can be helpful if you're doing the right thing. But I think it's also important to note that cameras may not tell the whole story. A lot of times we may see cell phone footage from citizens that are helpful, right? And I think any light that someone can shed is helpful. But cell phone footage or media footage that is spliced in such a way that you may see 30 seconds of an incident where an officer is perhaps striking a citizen, but you didn't see what led up to it, right? You didn't see the discourse, the combativeness, or anything that led up to that scene. So I think it's important that, yes, these videos and this footage is critical and important, but let's look at the whole picture. And not make snap judgments based on a fraction of an entire incident.
Well, Mayor Hawkins, we got to have you back, man. There are a couple more things on here. I'm going to post this on my Facebook page for you all to see this manifesto, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are about those things. You shed a lot of light on a lot of the issues, and we look forward to having you back on the show again.
I look forward to being back.
Thank you very much. This is Eric. I'm out.
This has been the Eric Dawson Radio Show. Can't get enough of Eric?
Hey, yo, man, why you stopping? That was funky.
Tune in live at 5, Monday through Wednesday, and 10 o'clock a.m. Thursday and Friday morning.
Absolutely, man.
Right here on 94.3 FM.
Splash Radio.
Coming.